Thank you very much for the kind introduction and the invitation. We are excited to be here. Yes. Okay, so we have only 15 minutes. So I jump into the topic. Our talk is called Cosmopolitan Language Cultures and Overcoming Methodological Nationalism in Linguistics, Insights from Transnational Migrant Networks. So methodological nationalism is a term probably many of you know. It is from the social sciences and from cultural anthropology, and it has been described as the theoretical assumption that national social units represent the natural order of the world, and it takes for granted that the nation or the state or the society is the natural social and political form of the modern world. And that has been criticized from many different angles, that we have these kind of methodological frameworks in academia. And of course, we find methodological nationalism also in linguistics. A methodologically nationalist understanding of language would be if we understand language as kind of by nature appearing in national space, and also conceptualize language as kind of an a priori object and a kind of natural affair. And we see that this is has been pretty influential in linguistics. What also talking about media here in conference and technologies, we want to discuss or also put forward that print technologies have been constitutive of the nation. So as media theorist Marshall McLuhan has argued, what we have called nations in recent centuries did not and could not precede the advent of Gutenberg technology, because it's this technology that has allowed for the distribution of standardized rules of language across territories as large as a nation. And of course, we see changes to that and also become reflective of that. So to bring it very much to the point in this 15-minute talk, we would consider national imaginations of language as having the following implications, or like the interaction of these framings. And the implications would be that we assume that languages somehow naturally arise from culturally homogeneous space, that languages are already there, or even the soul of a nation. A methodological implication or consequence of that is that often face-to-face interaction in monolingual settings has been tacitly constructed as natural language. This also goes jointly with what is called logocentrism, the idea that meaning of words and sentences are transparent and stable. This kind of is a something that goes together. And we in the remainder of this talk now will contrast such concept as epistemologies and concepts of language with an empirical case study where language practices are really different from methodologically nationalist assumptions. So this is our short theory introduction, and with this I hand over to May.
Thank you, Britta. So the case that we'll present here is part of my doctoral research on language practices that are emerging during mobility between West Africa, North Africa, and Europe. So I will present first the context of the emergence of these practices, fast how the data was collected, and then present only one case. So the emergence of practice is related to the general tendencies of irregular mobilities, which is that they are stepwise, people that move according to projects rather than destinations. And that means whether the project is to find security or to provide income to family. This project, if it's not realized in a place, people will consider going to the next place. And this mobility happens in a geography that is reshaped by migratory policies, European ones, and also all the agreements with the African states, and especially here North African states. And that means that people change their plans and strategies in relation to the obstacles and the opportunities they have. And from this result mobilities that can take several years, that are non-linear, and that imply living, socializing, interacting with people in diverse localities. And from this interactions, multi-situated interactions, new language practices develop, of which practices of Arabic, which is my focus. But it's worth reminding here that Arabic is not one language, it's a generic label for diverse varieties, vernaculars, styles, registers. So, and the standardized language of Arabic Fusha is mainly a written medium and not used in oral communication, daily oral communication. So the search is based on multi-situated observations and interviews, qualitative interviews in Italy, France, and actually now in Tunisia, but the data that is presented here, the narrative that is presented here was collected in Marseille in Europe. And the interviews are biographic on language practice, and sometimes they are up to 3 hours 30, and they are plurilingual. So I come from Syria, I live in France, and the languages that I use influence the languages of the interview, of course. So these are Arabic, French, English, and to a lesser degree, Italian. One of those narratives is of Abdel Haq. We met in Marseille through a common Sudanese friend last year. And he has left Niger when he was 17 years old. He grew up in a village, Hausa-speaking village, and went to Libya. So Libya is an important migratory crossroad, but also a pole of immigration itself since the 60s, and for diverse reasons. And so there's a high social diversity, especially in the mobility networks inside Libya. And this diversity is highlighted in Abdel Haq's narrative. So I'll play the excerpt here and the record, and the English translation is in English. Let me know if it works for you.
يعني ليبيا اصلا يعني زي حوش كبير كده. اصلا انت مع الطابق الرابع صح؟ في تلقى يعني الطابق الاول في ناس، الطابق الثاني في ناس، ثالث ورابع، يعني اجناس يختلف. يعني في مرات مصريين، في تلقى توانسه، ومرات تلقى سودانيين وتشاديين ونيجر، يعني يختلفوا كده. فانا سكنت كان في مصريين وتوانسه والسنغاليين وتشاديين وسودانيين كده يعني.
So as it highlights here that there are both non-Arabic speakers and Arabic speakers from different regions inside of these network mobilities in his socio-linguistic environment. But despite this diversity and the fact that he was able to communicate in Hausa with some of the people, he felt obliged to acquire communicative basics of Arabic to access to job market that was dominated by Arabic speakers, and especially local Libyan Arabic speakers. So to do so, he says, he started by watching series on YouTube, Egyptian and Algerian series. And 1 month later, when he felt more familiarized with the language, he started working, and he learned mostly his language while working on in the workplace. So here he describes the experience of first work he had with a Libyan contractor. There's noise in this record, so I will be reading the extract. أول مرة كان صعب إن الشغل نشتغله. يقول أنت من وين؟ ما تفهم عربي ولا تفهم كده، كيف نشتغله؟ خلاص الحمد لله في نصيب أنه نشتغلوا معه. بعد يومين ثلاثة نعلم كلمة كلمتين حتى الحمد لله لقيت مستوى شوية كده في العربية. So he describes how learning on spots, and his repertoire reflects kind of this process, because he has large vocabulary related to the work and the occupations he did in Tripoli too, in Libya, both in Sabha and Tripoli. So after working for this Libyan contractor, he worked for an Egyptian, and later when he moved to Tripoli, for a Syrian contractor, also Arabic speaker, with a Senegalese, a Guinean, and a Sudanese, and Arabic was the common language between the four of them, and they also lived together. So he was using Arabic both at home and in the workplace, but with people from different backgrounds, of which also Senegalese and Guinean. And after 6 years in Libya and a lot of struggles, he managed to cross to Malta. And there he was imprisoned when he arriving irregularly. So he decided he wanted to go farther, but because of this is an island, it was going to be complicated and expensive to go farther. So he had to work again to finance his travel. And there he was thrilled to find an Arabic speaker as an employer because he didn't speak Italian or English or Maltese. So he describes this situation.
تعودت انه اشتغل سباق وحاجات ده فقابلت سوري فقلت الحمد لله فاز احسن حاجه لي يعني نفهم منا ويفهمني اكثر يعني خلاص اشتغلت معاه.
And so he worked there with a Sudanese and a Senegalese, and he said the Arabic was the main communication medium, but also the same employer translated to the Senegalese who didn't speak Arabic in Malta. And he says this is how he started catching some English in Malta. 9 months later, he goes farther, he managed to do it, and he arrives to France. And in France, he finds himself in southern France. He was sent by the French administration there. And in the reception center where he was, the French elders, so it was a village, and French elders came to teach the basics of writing and reading in French. But he says that he learned mostly French through a Moroccan woman he met there. And he explains here this process.
فغلط تعرفت مع واحدة سوكا اسمها سوكا من المغرب. خلاص هي طبعا تعرف تتكلم عربي بتاعها صعب شويه لكن نتفهم عادي خلاص يعني مرات هي قاعده في السكن ما نفس السكن لكن ما بعيده من هنا يعني زي 15 دقيقه كده فخلاص مرات يعني نتونس معها كثير فهي تعرف فرنسي مطوله شويه ومرات تتكلم لي بالفرنسي فانا اتكلم معها بالفرنسي وعشان كده شوي تعلمت فرنسي.
And when we met last year, he says that he uses, beside Hausa and French, Arabic mostly in his daily communication because his social network is composed mainly by Chadians and Sudanese. So this is why he uses Arabic all the time. And he uses it also for entertainment, for media. And this is interesting also that he used digital media a lot because he has only oral use of language, but because there's the voice-based research function on YouTube, he is able to always to find the videos he is looking for and watch series, etc. And he says here that he watches them in Arabic, no matter which Arabic, because he distinguished the different varieties of Arabic. And he mentioned Sudanese cartoon, Lebanese singer, and a Tunisian rapper. So this is a huge diversity that not only in his network, but also in his digital practices. And this gives him a speech that is it's unique in the repertoires that is used because it's repertoires from different varieties of Arabic. So he uses, for example, Zol from Sudanese, Kida, used more in East Africa, Hosh to say house, which is used in Libya mainly, Bissah, which is more used in Algeria and Morocco, just only to give a few examples. And to say phone, he uses 3 vocabularies, Jawal, Naqal, which are usually from different varieties, and Telefon. And for money, he uses both Gurush and Fulus. So it's not only from different varieties, but also he uses different vocabularies to point to the same thing. And this shows that the polycentrality of his speech. So it's not only one norm of language that he was exposed to. And also during the entire conversation we had, he was adapting his speech to me, sometimes in an explicit way. For example, he was speaking about his work and he wanted to say sand, so he said Gaza, and he said, no, Gaza, this is how we say it in Libya, but in Syria, we would say Ramel. And so it was he was able to distinguish and also to choose from the repertoire to what he estimates to be more understandable by me. And he speaks in a very clear way about this process of adaptation. And this is what he said.
فأنا يعني نتعود على أي إنسان، يعني أي إنسان هسه مثلا إنسان يعني يتكلم مثلا من الجزائر، فأنا نقدر نحاول نتكلم بعض جزء من لغة جزائرية حتى هو يفهم شوية، يعني ما يقدر يثبتني بالضبط.
So to conclude, what he describes here is a practice that is elaborated both in Libyan, where Arabic is a dominant language, but also in European localities, not really in relation to the countries, but to the repertoire available in different spaces. And he was exposed during this process to different varieties and norms through his own mobility first, encounters with other mobile speakers, and through digital media. And in the result, he has a polynormative and liquidated, adapted, situated, adiolect language of his own. So I give to Britta to conclude this.
Yes, I know time's up, but what we just wanted to show with that is that we actually would claim we need a bit more of a cosmopolitan language research, where we recognize that there are complex networks of linguistic resources in space, and where standard national languages are interesting but quite unusual and an outcome of modernist European histories with print literacy and the naturalization of certain elite types of speech. And in all this, as many other people do currently, we understand language as languaging and interactive, embodied, or otherwise material cooperative activity that brings about meanings of science and social relationships. So we are curious to discuss this with you, and we are very curious to hear your questions. Thank you for your attention.